When Leo discovered a dusty VHS tape labeled "Play After Your Burial" in his late grandfather's attic, he thought it was just a heartbreaking final farewell. Forever. Now, trapped in a high-stakes race against time, Leo and his friends must hunt down the remaining hidden tapes before an anonymous competitor destroys them and erases the truth completely. Every single second counts, and the shocking mysteries unraveling within the static will keep you completely glued to your screen until the very last frame. Before we dive deeper into this emotional roller coaster, we would love to know where you are watching from. What city are you from? Please drop the name of your city in the comment section below so we can get to know each other better. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a single moment of this breathtaking journey. The dust motes danced lazily in the thin shafts of afternoon sunlight, piercing through the small, circular window of the attic. For Leo, the silence up here wasn't just the absence of sound. It was a heavy, suffocating weight that had settled over his chest ever since his grandfather, Arthur, passed away. At 17, Leo felt entirely untethered, navigating a world that moved too fast while he remained frozen in his grief. His fingers traced the wooden edge of an old, forgotten trunk, his mind wandering through memories of Arthur's booming laughter and the comforting scent of pipe tobacco and old film reels. This attic was Arthur's sanctuary, a chaotic archive of a life spent capturing the world through a lens, yet now it felt like a graveyard of forgotten stories. Leo took a deep breath, the stale air scratching his throat as he finally lifted the heavy lid of the trunk. Inside, nestled beneath stacks of vintage leather-bound journals and rusted camera lenses, lay a pristine black plastic case. It looked entirely out of place among the ancient relics. Leo's heart gave a sudden, erratic thud against his ribs as he pulled it out. There was no printed cover, no colorful artwork, only a stark white piece of masking tape slapped across the front. On it, written in Arthur's unmistakably sharp, elegant cursive handwriting, were words that made the breath catch in Leo's throat. "Play after your burial." A chill rippled down his spine despite the stuffy heat of the room. Leo stared at the dark, magnetic ribbon visible through the tiny windows of the VHS tape, his mind racing with a mix of intense longing and absolute disbelief. It was a message from beyond the veil, a final puzzle piece dropped into the empty void of his present life. Holding the cold plastic cassette tight against his chest, Leo practically flew down the creaking wooden steps of the attic, desperately searching for a way to bring those hidden magnetic strips to life. The main house felt sterile and overly bright compared to the shadowed sanctuary upstairs, with cardboard boxes stacked in the hallway as his family prepared to clear out Arthur's belongings. He knew asking his parents for help would only invite a lecture about dwelling on the past, so he slipped out the back door, his bicycle tires cutting through the overgrown lawn. Minutes later, he burst into Maya's garage, out of breath and holding the tape aloft like a sacred relic. Maya looked up from her workbench, soldering iron frozen in midair, her sharp eyes instantly locking on to the frantic expression on his face. When he laid the cassette on her desk and pointed to the chilling cursive handwriting, her usual analytical skepticism melted into pure fascination. They spent the next 2 hours rummaging through the dusty lower shelves of her father's workshop, bypassing broken stereo receivers and tangled wires, until they uncovered a heavy black Panasonic VCR covered in a thick layer of grime. Maya expertly cleaned the video heads with isopropyl alcohol, while Leo paced the concrete floor, his anxiety humming like a live wire. Hooking the archaic machine up to a bulky, flickering monitor felt like performing a séance. As the power light finally blinked to life with a soft green glow, Leo's hand trembled over the mechanical play button, fully aware that pressing it would change everything. The heavy mechanical click of the play button echoed through the quiet garage, immediately followed by a loud, aggressive hum as the old VCR swallowed the cassette whole. For several agonizing seconds, the monitor showed nothing but a chaotic blizzard of black and white static, the harsh white noise filling the tense space between Leo and Maya. Leo leaned forward, his knuckles turning white against the edge of the desk, praying that the fragile tape hadn't been ruined by decades of attic humidity. Then, the snow on the screen suddenly snapped into a crisp, stable image of Arthur sitting in his favorite mahogany study, looking remarkably healthy and vibrant. The sight of his grandfather brought a sharp lump to Leo's throat, but before he could lose himself in nostalgia, he noticed how intensely Arthur was staring into the lens. There was no warm smile or standard grandfatherly greeting. Instead, the old man leaned closer, his eyes projecting an urgent, almost desperate seriousness. "If you are watching this, Leo, the puzzle has begun," Arthur's recorded voice echoed clearly through the garage speakers, sending a profound shiver down the boy's spine. "Do not trust the silence that follows my departure, because the history of everything we love is about to be erased." Before Arthur could explain further, the video feed violently glitched, twisting his face into a kaleidoscope of colors before cutting abruptly back to a silent, empty black screen. Staring at the lifeless black monitor, Leo felt a sudden rush of frustration, refusing to believe his grandfather would leave such a cruel, incomplete message. That even though the video had cut out, the audio track still carried a faint, rhythmic pulsing sound beneath the residual hiss of the tape. Isolating the frequency, she ran the audio through a modern spectrum analyzer on her laptop, transforming the strange noises into a visual waveform. Leo watched over her shoulder as the erratic lines slowly stabilized, revealing a sequence of precise numbers and directional markers embedded within the audio data. It was a set of geographic coordinates, expertly hidden where only someone willing to look closer would ever think to find them. Maya quickly pulled up a digital satellite map of their coastal town, plugging in the coordinates with a focused intensity that made Leo's heart race. The digital pin dropped directly onto a remote, craggy peninsula on the northern edge of the shoreline, marking the exact location of the abandoned Whispering Point lighthouse. It became undeniable that Arthur hadn't just recorded a farewell, he had designed a complex trail of breadcrumbs meant specifically for his grandson to follow. Leaving the safety of the garage behind, the two teenagers pedaled furiously into the cool night air, their bicycle headlights cutting frail beams through the thick coastal fog. The familiar streets of their town felt eerie and unfamiliar under the shroud of midnight, casting long, dancing shadows across the asphalt as they neared the coast. Leo felt a strange exhilaration blooming beneath his anxiety, a stark contrast to the hollow numbness that had consumed him for the past month. Beside him, Maya rode in determined silence, though the occasional glance she threw his way spoke volumes about her unspoken worry for his emotional stability. As the paved road gave way to a rough gravel path, the rhythmic crashing of the ocean waves grew louder, blending with the howling wind that swept off the Atlantic. They eventually reached the base of the peninsula, where the skeletal silhouette of the old lighthouse loomed against the star-studded sky, like a forgotten giant. Leaving their bikes in the brush, they made their way up the slippery stone steps, the beam of Leo's flashlight dancing across the rusted iron door. Pushing it open with a loud, protesting screech, they stepped into the damp interior, the air smelling strongly of salt, decay, and the undeniable presence of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Sweeping his flashlight across the circular room, Leo watched the beam illuminate peeling green paint, broken glass, and an ancient wooden desk rotting in the center of the space. The lighthouse felt entirely frozen in time, yet as they approached the desk, Maya noticed that the thick layer of dust on the surface had been recently disturbed. Resting perfectly in the center of the clean patch was a heavy, tarnished brass lantern, its glass housing cracked, but its base completely intact. Leo reached out, his fingers finding a small, hidden catch near the bottom mechanism that released a secret drawer with a satisfying click. Inside lay another black VHS tape, pristine and untouched by the surrounding dampness, bearing a simple label that read, Part 2. Just as Leo reached for it, the beam of Maya's flashlight caught a glint of polished metal resting on the floor beneath the desk. She knelt down and retrieved a sleek, expensive silver fountain pen, entirely out of place in a derelict structure. Turning it over in her palm, she pointed to the clean engraving on the cap. The initials J.M. gleamed under the light. Someone else had been here very recently, monitoring Arthur's trail, transforming Leo's private quest into a dangerous race against an unknown competitor. Back in the garage, the tension was palpable as the second tape whirred to life, replacing the silence with a sweeping aerial shot of their town's historic district from 3 decades ago. This footage was entirely different from the first. It was a carefully edited documentary, featuring interviews with long-forgotten town elders and shots of beautiful, century-old buildings. Arthur's narration poured through the speakers, his voice younger but carrying the same commanding authority as he detailed a clandestine land agreement from the 1990s. He spoke of a hidden community archive that contained the original deeds to the waterfront, documents that legally prevented the land from ever being commercialized or destroyed. Leo watched in awe as his grandfather explained how a powerful group of private developers had tried to bury this history to build lucrative luxury high-rises. The tape showed Arthur hiding a master key to that archive somewhere within the town hall, intending to preserve the truth for future generations. Leo began to realize that his grandfather wasn't just an eccentric filmmaker capturing local history, he was the sole guardian of the town's cultural soul. The realization filled Leo with a mixture of profound pride and sudden crushing weight, knowing the responsibility now rested on his shoulders. Seeking to identify the owner of the silver pen, Leo and Maya visited the town library's historical archive the following morning, the atmosphere quiet and smelling of old paper. They were met by Julian, the newly appointed head curator, a sharp-dressed young man whose polite exterior couldn't quite hide the intense curiosity in his eyes. When Leo casually set the silver pen down on the counter, under the pretense of finding its owner, Julian's posture immediately stiffened, his eyes widening in recognition. He confessed that the pen belonged to him, revealing that he had been working secretly with Arthur during the final months of the old man's life. Arthur had chosen him to help digitize the endangered town records because of his unrestricted access to the building's restricted basements. Hearing this sent a sharp, agonizing sting of jealousy straight through Leo's chest, a sudden feeling of betrayal that threatened to choke him. He couldn't comprehend why his grandfather would trust an absolute stranger with these monumental secrets, while keeping his own flesh and blood completely in the dark. Maya placed a calming hand on Leo's trembling shoulder, sensing the emotional storm brewing inside him, as Julian offered to join their search. The walk home from the archive was miserable, with a sudden downpour of heavy rain, matching the dark, chaotic thoughts swirling through Leo's mind. He walked with his head down, ignoring Maya's attempts to start a conversation, his mind torn violently between his analytical logic and his wounded heart. Logic told him to drop the entire matter, to leave the tapes in the dirt, and focus on his impending college applications like a normal teenager. But his heart felt fiercely protective of Arthur's legacy, terrified that walking away would mean losing the final connection he had to his grandfather. When Maya finally grabbed his jacket, forcing him to stop beneath the dripping awning of a closed storefront, the pent-up frustration boiled over. She accused him of using the mystery as an unhealthy shield to avoid processing his actual grief, turning his grandfather into a myth instead of a person. Leo yelled back, his voice cracking with raw emotion, as he admitted he felt entirely abandoned by everyone, including Arthur. They stood in the pouring rain, panting and furious, the deep rift in their lifelong friendship laying completely exposed between them. An uncomfortable silence hung over the neighborhood for the next 2 days, giving Leo plenty of time to sit in his room and stare at the ceiling, reflecting on his outburst. He realized that Maya wasn't his enemy. She was the only person who had stood by him while his world was crumbling around him. Swallowing his pride, he walked over to her house, finding her sitting on the front porch steps with a laptop open on her knees. He offered a quiet, sincere apology, which she accepted with a soft, relieved smile that instantly lifted the heavy weight from his chest. With their bond restored, they sat down to combine Maya's technical expertise with Leo's intimate, lifelong knowledge of his grandfather's specific habits and creative patterns. They realized Arthur always left clues in threes, meaning a final third tape must exist somewhere within the historic district itself. Julian's archival data confirmed that the city council had just fast-tracked a demolition order for the oldest block in town, scheduled to begin in less than 48 hours. The realization galvanized them, transforming their personal quest for closure into an urgent mission to save their town's history before the bulldozers erased it forever. The morning sun rose behind a thick wall of gray clouds as Leo, Maya, and Julian met near the perimeter of the historic town hall block. The entire area had already been fenced off with bright orange construction barriers, and the ominous rumble of heavy machinery echoed through the empty streets. Security guards patrolled the main entrances, making a legal entry completely impossible for 3 teenagers carrying backpacks full of old electronic gear. Julian used his expired staff key card to open a rusted utility door in the rear alleyway, slipping them inside just as a patrol car turned the corner. The interior of the building was dark and hollow, stripped of its furniture, and smelling intensely of concrete dust and impending doom. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors using the beams of their phones, every distant thud of a construction hammer shaking the floorboards beneath their feet. According to Arthur's second tape, the final master key and the third cassette were hidden in the old boiler room beneath the foundation. They descended the steep concrete stairs, the air growing warmer and more suffocating with every step they took into the dark. In the depths of the boiler room, illuminated only by the harsh, sweeping beams of their flashlights, Leo spotted a small iron lockbox bolted behind a ventilation pipe. Julian handed him a crowbar, and with a collective effort, they pried the rusted box open, revealing the pristine casing of tape 3. But their triumph was terrifyingly short-lived. A sudden, massive explosion of sound shook the building as a demolition crew began clearing the upper brick facade. The violent tremor caused Leo to lose his footing on the slick concrete floor, the precious cassette slipping from his frantic fingers. It fell through the air in slow motion, striking the edge of an iron boiler tank before shattering into several pieces across the floor. Leo dropped to his knees, his heart sinking into absolute despair as he saw the delicate magnetic ribbon tangled and snapped in 2 places. Tears of pure frustration welled in his eyes as he looked at the ruined plastic casing, feeling like he had personally failed his grandfather's final, dying wish. The project felt entirely over, their hopes crushed beneath the weight of the crumbling building above them. Refusing to let Leo give up, Maya knelt beside him in the dust, her calm voice cutting through the rising panic as she carefully gathered the broken fragments of plastic. She pulled a portable splicing kit and a roll of specialized adhesive tape from her backpack, tools she had wisely brought along just in case. They retreated to a small, sheltered alcove beneath a heavy concrete beam, setting up a single battery-powered desk lamp to illuminate their makeshift workspace. With Julian keeping watch at the door, Maya and Leo worked in tandem, their breathing synchronized as they began the incredibly delicate process of repairing the ribbon. Leo used a pair of fine tweezers to untangle the glossy magnetic film, holding his breath to keep his hands perfectly steady as Maya aligned the microscopic edges. Every touch of the fragile tape felt like holding on to a piece of Arthur's living soul, a physical manifestation of the memories they were fighting to preserve. For 2 intense hours, completely ignoring the vibrations of the building above, they manually spliced the broken ends back together, millimeter by millimeter. With the repaired tape carefully wound back into a spare plastic casing, the trio slipped out of the building and sprinted across the square toward the active city hall. They burst into the main council chambers just as the emergency meeting regarding the final demolition approval was drawing to a tense, bureaucratic close. Leo didn't hesitate. He marched down the center aisle, Julian utilizing his official archival credentials to command the room's attention, while Maya bypassed the media console. Before the stunned council members could protest, Maya slammed the tape into the podium's VCR, overriding the projector screen with Arthur's face. The room fell into a dead, breathless silence as Arthur's young, vibrant voice echoed through the high-ceilinged chamber, presenting absolute legal proof of the land's protected status. The video displayed undeniable, certified historical deeds that Arthur had unearthed decades ago. documents that rendered the city's demolition contracts completely illegal. Arthur closed the recording with a stirring, passionate speech about the vital importance of preserving community heritage, his eyes burning with a timeless conviction that left every politician in the room completely speechless. The final words of Arthur's speech faded into a profound, heavy silence that seemed to hold the entire council chamber captive for several agonizing moments. The head councilman stared at the glowing projector screen, his hands shuffling through papers as the reality of the legal evidence sank in completely. Outside the open windows, a massive crowd of local citizens had gathered, having heard rumors of the dramatic intervention taking place inside. The developer's lawyers tried to argue on a technicality, but the sheer authenticity of the historical footage made any counter-argument entirely hollow. After a brief, whispered conference among the board members, the councilman raised his gavel and slammed it down with a resounding crack that echoed through the hall. He officially announced the immediate and permanent revocation of the demolition order, declaring the historic district a protected cultural landmark. The chamber erupted into a deafening roar of cheers, and Leo felt a massive, overwhelming wave of relief wash over him, his vision blurring with happy tears. As the chaotic celebrations moved outside into the sunny plaza, Julian approached Leo in the quiet corridor, holding a small, weathered paper envelope he had found tucked inside the original tape box. The front of the envelope simply bore Leo's name, written in that familiar, elegant cursive script that had started this entire journey in the attic. Leo walked away from the crowd, sitting on a stone bench beneath a large oak tree to open the letter with trembling fingers. Dear Leo, the ink read, if you are reading this, it means you didn't let the silence win, and you found the courage to finish what I started. I didn't design this puzzle just to save old buildings. I designed it to save you from pulling away from the world when I left. The letter explained that Arthur knew Leo's brilliant mind needed a purpose to heal, and that true strength was found in collaboration and community. Leo clutched the paper to his chest, the final lingering knots of grief and abandonment inside him completely untying at last. That evening, the heavy atmosphere that had plagued the family home for weeks completely evaporated, replaced by a warmth that felt like a permanent springtime. Leo sat in the living room with his parents and Maya, the old VCR hooked up to the main television as they watched Arthur's old family films together. For the first time since the funeral, they weren't crying out of sadness. They were laughing at Arthur's terrible jokes and his chaotic behind-the-scenes mishaps. Leo's mother hugged her son tightly, expressing a deep, quiet pride in how he had managed to honor his grandfather's memory while uniting the entire town. The house no longer felt like a monument to a tragic loss, but rather a vibrant museum of a beautiful life well lived. Leo looked around the room, seeing the smiles on his family's faces, and realized that his happy ending wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about reclaiming his place within his own family and understanding that love didn't end when a person passed away. 2 months later, the historical district was thriving, its old brick buildings bustling with new life as the town transformed the area into a cultural center. The old town hall basement had been completely renovated, turned into a bright, modern space called the Arthur Memorial Archive and Media Exhibit. Julian stood at the entrance, welcoming visitors and school groups, while Maya managed the digital cataloging system she had designed from scratch. Leo was officially named the co-director of the archive, spending his afternoons teaching younger kids how to operate vintage cameras and preserve old media. The dusty relics from his grandfather's attic had found a permanent, meaningful home where they could inspire future generations of storytellers. Looking around the bustling room, filled with laughter and curiosity, Leo felt a deep sense of profound accomplishment. He had transformed his personal sorrow into a public gift, ensuring that the history of their community would never be forgotten or erased by progress. As the sun began its slow descent into the Atlantic, casting brilliant hues of orange and purple across the sky, Leo and Maya drove up to the Whispering Point Lighthouse. They sat on the warm hood of their car, the cool ocean breeze rustling their hair, as they watched the waves crash against the rocks below. The old structure looked less like a lonely ghost now, and more like a proud sentinel guarding the edge of their world. Maya leaned her head on Leo's shoulder, a quiet gesture of solidarity that spoke of the unbreakable bond they had forged through the fire of their adventure. Leo smiled, looking out at the endless horizon, realizing he was no longer terrified of the uncertain future or the changes it would bring. He had found his voice, his passion, and a profound understanding of his own strength through the beautiful puzzle his grandfather had left behind. The void in his chest was completely filled, replaced by a steady, quiet confidence that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The soft click of the camera tripod locking into place sounded loud in the quiet sanctuary of the attic, which was now clean, organized, and filled with a gentle golden twilight. Leo adjusted the lens of Arthur's favorite vintage camcorder, a peaceful smile playing on his lips as he looked through the viewfinder. On the small table in front of the lens sat a brand new, completely blank VHS tape, its pristine black casing reflecting the last rays of the afternoon sun. Maya and Julian stepped into the frame, laughing as they squeezed together on the old velvet sofa, holding up a framed photograph of Arthur, smiling proudly with his camera. Leo walked around the tripod and joined them, sitting right in the center, feeling an overwhelming surge of gratitude for the journey that had brought them all together. He looked directly into the camera lens, knowing that while the past was a beautiful foundation, the future was an unwritten script waiting for their own voices. My grandfather taught me that history isn't just about old buildings or dusty documents. Leo spoke softly to the recording lens, his voice steady and filled with a profound, newfound wisdom. It's about the invisible threads that connect us, the stories we choose to preserve, and the love we refuse to let fade into silence. He reached out, his hand wrapping around Maya's and Julian's, forming a tight, unbreakable circle of friendship that had saved a town and healed a broken heart. The moral of Arthur's grand puzzle was finally clear. We cannot outrun grief, but we can transform it into a beacon of hope for others, ensuring that the shadows of yesterday never eclipse the brilliant promise of tomorrow. With a deep breath and a heart completely at peace, Leo leaned forward and pressed the record button, ready to create a lifetime of new memories.